story time. Okay, so this is about the first time I went to Paris. Uh, it was my first trip overseas. So I have a mentor who I met through the Project Management Institute professional organization that I belong to. And she was my mentor. She helped me to study, to take my PMP exam and so forth. And we just stayed in touch and became friends. So she is originally from Paris and she became an American citizen. But she goes to Paris regularly. She has a flat there. So she has invited me several times, had invited me several times. And I just didn't go. And I think part of it was because I was afraid of, sorry, I got a hair that keeps poking me in the eye. Um, I think part of the reason that I hesitated at first is because I was afraid of the long flight. And I was afraid to fly over the ocean, to be honest. So I, I just said no. So this one time it was in, I want to say 2014, maybe 2016. It was not too long after my mom passed. And at that time, I was kind of like, life is short. Let me just do whatever. And she was inviting me in the wintertime. My first instinct was to wait until it got warm. But I'm like, you know what? I might not even be around when it gets warm. So let me go. So I accepted her invitation. She and her husband were going to be in Paris for the holidays. She was going down in after Thanksgiving, and they would be there through Christmas. So I was going to go the middle of December. So I did. I flew to Paris. I got there a day before her, so I had to get a hotel for the night until she got into town. Trying to get the best rate, so I had to come in a day early. So I flew in a day early and I stayed at some hotel that was not too far off the airport. And in preparation for my trip to Paris, I was working on my French, of course. Uh, Bien sûr, that's of course in French. Um, so anyway, I did go to Paris. Excuse me, my friend showed up um, the next day. I was, my first thought, I had to go back to the airport that next day to wait for her flight to come in so we could go to the flat together. And while I was sitting in the airport, I was just looking around. And my first thought was, I didn't expect to see so many different people of different races, different skin tones, different, just, I mean, it was so diverse. I was so surprised. And I don't know how many times people came up to me and just started speaking French like they thought I belonged there. And I'm just kind of like, ah, I don't speak French. So it was, I don't know. It was funny. It probably wasn't funny to them, but yeah. So that was my first thought, and I was like, wow, this is so cool. Anyway, that was my first thought. So I meet her, we go to her flat. So during that time, I was there for about 10 days. I walked all over the place. I mean, I walked and walked and walked and walked and walked, the cobblestones, the stairs, the hallways and stairs and the subway station or the train station, getting familiar with, the RER or the metro. That's the different types of trains and where they went and which one to get on for where I was going. I went to Notre Dame. Of course, this was before the fire. I, of course, went to the Eiffel Tower. I went to the Louvre. Oh, okay. Well, let me get to the crazy stuff. So it was the night before I was getting ready to go home. I had walked all over Paris. I had seen everything. I was feeling so great. I was in love with Paris. and I was on the train, and the train stopped. We were stopped for some reason, and they had the doors open, and they said we have a brief delay. So while I was sitting on the train, I started feeling hot, and I'm like, okay, I recognize this feeling. I need to get some air because it was cooler out. I had on my coat, and I'm like, it's cooler off the train. Not that it was hot, it was just me. I was flushed and wasn't feeling well. So I got up, I walked off the train, and I was trying to walk towards this bench that was across the way, and I didn't make it there. I passed out. So I remember someone screaming as I was going down. And I came to, and of course, had all these faces around me, and I was telling them I knew enough in my head that I was still in France. And the words that I told them I was American, je suis Américain, American, uh, je veux sucre. So I was saying, j'ai besoin sucre. I was basically saying I need sugar. I thought it was my blood sugar, so I'm like, I need sugar. So someone gave me a cookie. Someone came over with some water in in a cup with sugar in it. I don't know where they got this stuff from, but I drank it, and I thought I was okay. So they got me up, and they said, "You want to sit on the bench?" And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." So I got on the bench, and next thing I knew, I was waking up. I was on the ground again, and they called the ambulance. So the ambulance came, and of course they were asking me questions. I gave them my passport out of my purse, and they carried me off, put me in the ambulance. In the ambulance, I had another, uh, I'll call it an attack. I don't know what this was. I was just like, it was like something came over me like a storm. It's like it would be coming in the distance. I could feel it coming, 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 and increasing. And then my heart rate increases, my breathing would increase. I was like I was having trouble breathing, and it was just, I don't know, it was just really weird. So they got me to the hospital. I got in the hospital, and during the time when they were hooking me up on IVs and asking me questions, it came again, and I'm just like, oh my God, I'm like, what is happening to me? Um, so it was hectic. Their English was broken. Of course, my French was broken, and it was my first time ever having to go to the hospital in an ambulance. It was my first time staying the night in a hospital, besides when I had my children. Um, it was really scary, uh, trying to talk to them, in a different language. If you've ever had to go to a hospital and you've been there any length of time, there's like shift changes. So the first doctor I had was a young black female. She seemed very empathetic to what was happening with me, and and talked to me slowly and explained things to me. And basically, she said that she thinks I had pulmonary embolism, which is blood clot that a deep vein thrombosis, which usually happens in your legs, and then when that clot breaks up and moves through your body, it can get stuck in your lungs and make you pass out. People have died from that. So that's what she says she thinks happened to me, because nothing else, they couldn't find anything else that would cause what was happening to me. So they went with the whole deep vein thrombosis to pulmonary embolism, put me on blood thinners, um, and basically told me I couldn't fly home. It was dangerous for me to be up in the air with this blood clot and blah, blah, blah. So, sorry. So I was scared. My friend did come, and she did some translating for me at the hospital for a while, and then she said she had to go back home where her husband was there. So I spent the night in the hospital alone. Um, yeah, I cried. um, I was afraid. feeling sorry for myself, because I was alone and I didn't know what was happening to me. Um, in the hospital, I was in a room with like old men, and there was a woman in there, and two men, I think, were in the same room as me. And they said they'd move me to a room later. So in the middle of the night, they did come to get me to move me to a room. And I'm like, okay. Um, and shortly after they moved me to that room, they came and told me they need to give somebody else the room that's more um severe than I was, I guess. So they moved me out of the room and they put me back in a group room. Again, I could tell there's some men in there. I could tell from the coughing and some of the talking or the moaning that I heard. But I'm like, whatever. Let me just try to get some sleep. Um, anyway, that night, I mentioned the first doctor I had was very nice and everything. The next doctor I had, he came and he's like, "Do you know French?" And I'm like, un peu," and he's like, "It's petit peu." Anyway, uh, yeah, he wasn't very nice. He said, "Do you understand what's happening with you?" And I said, "I think so." And I told him what the other doctor had told me, and he's like, "Okay." And then he was off and never to be seen again. Anyway, I spent the night in the hospital. That morning, I was awakened, and the doctor said that they're going to send me home. And I'm like, the other doctor said she thought I would have to stay in the hospital for a few days. Why are you sending me home? Um, they said that you're okay to go. Uh, so they said, we'll give you breakfast first. And this is something that was funny too. So they said, do you want coffee? And I responded in French, yes, I want coffee, and whatever it was. Basically, she came back with a bowl of coffee and a baguette. And I'm just like, did my dumb ass tell them I wanted coffee in a bowl? I was just, it was too funny. I'm like, did I ask for coffee in a bowl in French and didn't know what I was saying? But no, apparently that's what they do. They serve you coffee in a bowl. That was a thing my friend told me. So I'm not as goofy as I thought. Anyway, I checked out of the hospital, which that was a interesting thing in itself. I will mention that coming from America, you go in the hospital, it's all about how are you paying for it, what's your insurance. What they never once asked me if I had insurance, how I was going to pay for it. They didn't ask me for a credit card. Um, so when I was checking out, I'm like, I have insurance. I need to give you that information. And the woman was like, she was telling me to go. And I'm like, but I need to give you my insurance information. So again, I had to call my friend and have her talk to the woman and tell her, the woman, I have insurance. I'm not just a tourist here taking advantage of your healthcare system. I have insurance, so I want to give that to you. So I was able to do that. I was sitting there trying to figure out now, am I safe to go home? Because like I said, the doctor before said you should not be on a plane. You're going to, I don't know how long you're going to have to stay in this hospital because this is very serious. And just to feel like I was kicked out of the hospital that morning with no for sure, hey, you're fine. Um, I was really, I was really afraid. I called my insurance company, which was Alliance Insurance. I would recommend them because they were very helpful with me going through this situation. They basically told me, don't leave that hospital without them giving you a document that says you're safe to travel. They wouldn't do that. All they would do is basically say that they discharged me. This is what happened. She was admitted to the hospital. This is what we did, and then we discharged her. They would not give me a statement saying, we swear she's safe to travel. And as I understood it, the Delta was going to want a statement that said I was safe to travel too. So I didn't know what I was going to do. Yeah, I cried again, but that didn't solve anything. So I decided to stay on at Paris 3 more days just to be sure and see how I was feeling. Um, I was a little weak. I think I was still kind of shocked from everything that kind of happened and also a little afraid. But I called my doctor back home, told him what happened. He said, "Oh, just come in as soon as you get back in town." He didn't tell me not to fly. He didn't tell me how long to wait or whatever, whatever. So I stayed in Paris a couple more days. I hung out with my friends. They took me to a couple of Christmas markets, and and then I flew home. On the way home, I had no problem. I didn't pass out anymore. I went and saw my doctor, and really, that whole passing out thing lasted about a year. Just where I had episodes of, I told you my heart racing and the breathing, and from the outside looking in, it looks like a panic attack, but my body's doing the reverse of a panic attack. So when a panic attack, your vessels constrict. Um, with what I was having, it's a syncope. I'm drawing a blank. But basically, what happens is uh, a hormone gets released into my body that tells all my blood vessels to dilate at the same time. So your blood vessels are like this, and then they just dilate for whatever reason. So all the blood, of course, with gravity, pools in your legs. And if I stand up, I'm going to pass out because I have my blood's not flowing up here. It's all, not pushing through my vessels. So my heart's beating faster trying to get that blood to go through, these dilated vessels. And I'm breathing hard because my heart's pumping hard, and I'm sweating, and it usually lasts about 15 minutes. So I got used to it. I started recognizing it when it came. Um, I wouldn't get up because if I got up, I'd pass out. So I usually stayed where I was, and I just kind of went through it. Um, it lasts about 15 to 20 minutes, and then I'm okay. I mean, I'm worn out, like I had worked out or something, but I'm okay. Um, I'm sure I'll remember the name of it, and I'll put the name of it up there, the disorder. But but yeah, it happened a few more times on planes. Um, it was that year was tough for me medically. Uh, I had complications from the blood thinners. I wound up in the hospital needing a transfusion. It was a hot mess. But this is a long story. I wanted to tell this story because number one, when you travel, I'm an advocate for travel insurance because you never know what's going to happen. I got the first time that wasn't the first time I passed out on a trip, believe it or not. I passed out in Jamaica the first time, so I'll save that for another story time. Um, but it was the same thing. But you know, that was even though my friend was there, I was running around by myself a lot because she was working during the day. Um, people people help. It's those of you that are afraid to take a solo trip, because what if something happens? These people jump to help. I think you'd like to think that people are kind, for the most part, and they care about other people, especially if someone's in distress. Someone jumps out to assist. So all these people came to my defense when I passed out in this foreign land by myself. Um, and they made sure that I got to a hospital. I mean, that didn't deter me from traveling solo again. I still traveled places, you know, and then I took my sabbatical, and I was bouncing around the planet by myself. So I say that to say, for those of you that are thinking about taking solo trips and being afraid, don't let fear hold you back. Um, yeah, so that's my story. Since then, I've been to Paris, what, four more times, I think, maybe five, four, three, four, several more times. Um, so, uh, so yeah, that's my story. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments.